Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Kris. It just popped up on my feed from Agent Flappy a couple weeks ago. This is the worst presidents in American history. So I'm going to guess George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, FDR. I mean, right off the bat, those guys are terrible. I think they destroyed America, to be honest. So, anyways, you can give that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, helps me out. There's a little thanks button there. You can click on that, donate if you'd like to, request a video. Your name sponsors the video. Let's get into it.
Chasing down runaway slaves, to stealing millions from wounded veterans, to doing nothing while the country burned to the ground. These are the 10 worst presidents in American history. And they're so bad, even I could do a better job. But first is Benjamin Harrison, who isn't exactly a household name. In fact, if you showed his face to 100 Americans, most would say, "Isn't that the guy from the Titanic?" But
For anybody who doesn't know, I'm currently reading volume 3 of The Life of Benjamin Harrison, and I visited his home in, I think, 2018. He's in Indianapolis. President-wise, not fantastic. Was a general in the Civil War. I just want to say, by saying worst presidents in American history, we're not saying the worst people, because Benjamin Harrison was a really good person.
he actually made a huge mark, mainly by wrecking the economy and then vanishing before he could take the blame. Because in
Well, hold on now. He gave up pretty much running for a second term because his wife died. So I'm not going to say he just gave up and ran away.
1890, Harrison signed the McKinley Tariff, jacking up tariffs to nearly 50%. The idea was to protect American businesses. But what actually happened was prices skyrocketed.
The McKinley Tariff was written or created by William McKinley. Harrison was the 23rd president. McKinley was the 25th president. So both Republicans. So you can kind of see.
Foreign trade collapsed, and farmers got absolutely smoked. And as if that wasn't enough, he burned through the entire federal surplus like a kid after his first paycheck. But the worst part, none of this came crashing down until after he left office.
Unfortunately, that's typically how it happens. No changes aren't made overnight that will affect everyone the next day. This is months or years in the future. You know, what Trump does today may not have implications, where we're in 2025, may not have implications until 2027, 2028. You know, and then he could throw a little Band-Aid at it, and then the next president, it could come crashing down because it's just not completely fixed. So yeah, nothing is overnight screwed up.
When the Panic of 1893 devastated the economy and President Grover Cleveland was left dealing with the dumpster fire. No fair! But Harrison, he was long gone, chilling back in Indiana, writing books and pretending like nothing happened. So no, Benjamin Harrison didn't commit crimes or start wars. He just played Jenga with the economy and walked away as it collapsed. But none of that was as bad as Millard Fillmore, who turned every citizen into a slave hunter. Because in 1850, the nation was divided over slavery. The South was loving it. The North, not so much. But the South was threatening to secede.
He basically told the president, he was vice president when Zachary Taylor was president, number 12. And he was Zachary Taylor's vice president. As vice president, you're president of the Senate. And Zachary Taylor was trying to get something passed. And Millard Fillmore basically told him, if it comes down to me being the tiebreaker, I think it's a terrible thing. I'll vote against it. That doesn't happen. Millard Fillmore made it very clear. If I don't like it, I don't care if I'm your vice president. If I don't like it, I'll vote against it. Zachary Taylor died, I think, 18 months in office. So Millard Fillmore took over 2 years, and that was all he had.
So, in an effort to compromise and preserve the Union, Fillmore signed the Fugitive Slave Act, legally requiring every U.S. citizen to assist in the capture of runaway slaves. In other words, if a slave showed up on your doorstep and you offered them a glass of water, it could land you in prison, even if you lived in a free state. That's nuts! But as you may have guessed, this backfired. Because normal people who never cared about slavery were suddenly like, wait, what the is going on? With abolitionist movements growing overnight and more normies becoming radicalized by the day. So while Fillmore thought he was keeping the peace, he ended up pouring fuel on the fire, pushing the nation one step closer towards civil war. But that's not as embarrassing as this next president, William Henry Harrison, who holds the record for the shortest presidency in American history. Cause in 1841, Harrison was 68 years old, one of the oldest presidents elected.
Okay, this one was completely stupid. He shouldn't be on the list. He's more of incomplete. To have him on the list, I have to question your list. He died 31 days in office after giving his speech, so to call him the worst president is pretty stupid.
Elected at the time. So, to prove he still had energy for the job, he delivered the longest inauguration speech ever recorded, nearly 2 hours long. Man's out here with no coat, no hat, and no common sense. The old man just wanted to prove he still had it, a lot like your grandpa trying to do a kickflip on your skateboard. But a few weeks later, he came down with a bad cold that turned into pneumonia. For most of
But also, he was dealing with tainted Washington water, and he may have had not just pneumonia, but he may have been given bad water, and that helped contribute to him fighting not just pneumonia, but now other issues with bad water.
history, we thought it came from his crazy speech in the rain. But modern historians believe it was more likely typhoid from contaminated drinking water at the White House. Either way, 31 days after taking office, William Henry Harrison was dead. He didn't sign a single law or make one decision.
That's exactly how you know he shouldn't be on the list. Yeah, I got to question this one.
Instead, he spent more time writing an inauguration speech than being an actual president. And to make matters worse, he triggered a constitutional crisis. Because at the time, nobody knew what happens after a president dies in office. It wasn't 100% clear if the vice president simply acted as president or became president outright.
And that was John Tyler stepping up. The staff basically called John Tyler in, and gave him this big thing like, listen, you're the vice president. We don't want to interfere with this. People know you. We are going to step in collectively, and we are going to take the presidential role as a collective. And you just do your thing. Now, there's some power-hungry people in that cabinet that wanted that. John Tyler, thank you, John Tyler, listened to him, and then when they got done, said, okay, sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and move my stuff in to the president's office, come Monday. And if there's a problem with that, I'll accept your resignations come Monday morning. All right? Great meeting, fellas. And got up and left. And so those people figured, okay, John Tyler, he made a very good point. He said, William Henry Harrison and I were elected. You were selected. How do you argue that? So he took over. They decided we're going to make sure he's a puppet, where he'll do what we want. And he didn't like the bills they were passing. He told them, I'm the president of the United States, and I'm not the president of the Whigs. And so that was one of the reasons why they kicked him out of the party. And Andrew Jackson got in his ear and started telling him, look, work with Republicans, pass things that benefit Whigs and Democrats. And he did. And then he wanted to switch parties at the end and become a Democrat. And Andrew Jackson was like, nah, we can't trust you. So screwed him over. But, William Henry Harrison shouldn't be on this list at all.
Thankfully, John Tyler stepped up and said, "I'm president now," and everyone just kind of went along with it. But what was William Henry Harrison's legacy? No scandals, no war, no nothing. Just one epic speech and a short stay at the White House.
He was a general during the War of 1812. Battle of Tippecanoe. One of his slogan was Tippecanoe and Tyler too. I take great offense to William Henry Harrison being on this list, as you can see. Tippecanoe and Tyler too, which is the slogan that got him elected president. Governor's Mansion, that he was the governor of the Indiana Territory. It's in Vincennes, Indiana. Great place. Recommend it. He had two sit-down meetings with Tecumseh there, and he was. It was him that went after Tecumseh, and they killed him. He himself did not, but you know.
If there were a Hall of Fame for how to completely blow a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Harrison would be a first ballot member. But at least he didn't
I'm guessing that's Franklin Pierce, but yeah, William Tecumseh Jr. William Henry Harrison being on this list. No, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. If that's the case, Garfield should be on this list. Zachary Taylor. Garfield had 6 months. Zachary Taylor had 18 months. William McKinley did have at least one term. Lincoln had one term. JFK had a term. So they should be on the list too.
completely destroy America, like Franklin Pierce, who, well, came pretty dang close. 'Cause with his movie star good looks and smooth-talking speeches, Pierce became elected to deal with the whole slavery problem. But
he came into office losing his child. He was a drunk and completely just fell apart. Would I have handled it differently? I don't know. So his presidency was a failure. He didn't sign good things into law, but he was also dealing with that struggle and then drinking and just never recovered.
he quickly made one giant mistake: the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. You see, back then there was a bunch of unorganized land after the Louisiana Purchase. State lines were still being drawn, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act established the areas as U.S. territories. But it also stated that popular sovereignty would determine if slavery was allowed in each territory. In other words, the new settlers would vote on it, reversing the long-standing Missouri Compromise, which banned it above a certain line. So, what was the result? Pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces flooded Kansas with rifles, torches, and angry mobs. The territory quickly descended into chaos and bloodshed. Houses were burned. Families
All right, sorry about that. Phone. I just went back 5 seconds.
to chaos and bloodshed. Houses were burned. Families slaughtered. And the 5-year bloodbath was nicknamed Bleeding Kansas. So what did Franklin Pierce do to stop it?
Bleeding Kansas, one of the people that was in that was John Brown, who went on to storm Harper's Ferry, was taken down by Robert E. Lee, and then hanged, and was one of the... If you're in the North, he was one of the... What's the word? Why is nothing coming to me? He was one of the people who kind of started the Civil War. I don't want to say a hero. I just stuttered. I don't want to say he was a hero of the Civil War, but he was, because in the South he's not a hero. But he was one of the antagonists. Is that the word I'm trying to think of? I don't think it is.
Pretty much nothing. In fact, he backed the pro-slavery side, which formed an illegitimate government through voter fraud and violence. He even sent in federal troops to stabilize the new government. Pretty crazy times, because instead of calming tensions between the North and South, Pierce accelerated the nation's march towards civil war. But this next terrible president is one you might not expect, and that's Woodrow Wilson, who's known for his lofty ideals like championing the League of Nations and making the world safe for democracy.
There's some aspects of Wilson I like. I don't think he's as bad as some people say. But Woodrow Wilson is not shocking to be on this list.
And hey, he did some pretty good stuff, like lead us through World War I. But here's the problem. Back at home, he levied some of the worst attacks on American freedoms in U.S. history. During World War I, he signed the Espionage Act and Sedition Act, making it a crime to criticize the government, the military, or even the flag. And hey, I love...
Okay. Lincoln also did the same thing. Not the flag, but to criticize, the government, stuff like that. So again, Lincoln should be on this list if we're going by certain things.
America just as much as the next guy. I'm a friggin' bald eagle. But this was downright crazy. Because under his administration, over 2,000 Americans were prosecuted, like journalists, union leaders, and everyday citizens who dared to speak their minds. Free speech, the bedrock of American democracy, was crushed under the weight of wartime paranoia. But Wilson thought it was totally worth it. 'Cause after World War I, he pushed for the League of Nations, the first worldwide intergovernmental organization designed to maintain world peace.
Wilson's naval secretary was one of the people who really fought for that, and that was Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt went on to become president. League of Nations crashed and burned. And so he helped form the United Nations.
But there was one little problem. It was rejected by the U.S. Senate.
Real fast. The rejection by the Senate, Wilson had he was a Democrat. Wilson had the Republican votes. And then what happened? He went on a little speaking tour in America after working with Republicans, and he made it political. Republicans don't want this because Republicans hate America. They hate freedom, blah, blah, blah. And the Republicans who had just worked on this and liked the concept and the idea were just like, wow. Okay, cool. And then Wilson, there was an election. That's why he was doing it. There was an election, and he lost maybe the House and the Senate, and they were like, yep, you're never getting that now.
Out of fear that it would drag America into European wars. He couldn't believe it. But here's the funny part. The League of Nations still ended up happening with 63 other countries, just without the U.S. So Wilson was left crying outside the club. And to cap it all off, he punished Germany so severely after World War I with the Treaty of Versailles that it sowed the seeds for World War II.
Wilson didn't do that. That was France and England and a couple others. Wilson was trying to get leniency for them because he knew you can't punish a country like that difficult. They would not give. Wilson fought it for so long, realized most of those people were against him, and he gave in. I think he got a little concession, but not enough. Not nearly enough of what he wanted, but he did give in. But he himself wasn't the one who punished him.
In the end, Wilson became a prisoner of his own ego. A man so obsessed with his vision, he refused to bend, causing chaos at home and abroad. And Wilson's presidency had some eerily similar parallels to this next guy, George W. Bush, who entered the White House with a handshake and a smirk, until history threw him every disaster short of a meteor strike. First, 9/11. And to his credit, Bush brought the whole country together for about 6 months. But what followed reshaped the entire world, pretty much for the worse. First came the decision to invade Iraq, based on bad intelligence that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction.
That was a terrible decision.
Turns out, he didn't. But by then, the U.S. was locked into a $1 trillion war that cost over 4,400 American lives, wounded tens of thousands more, and destabilized the Middle East for decades.
Let's not forget, we also killed like 2 million Iraqis. So the 4,400 deaths of American soldiers doesn't look so bad, does it?
Thanks for your service. But like Woodrow Wilson, Bush gutted the civil liberties of Americans at home by passing the Patriot Act in October of 2001, which dramatically expanded surveillance powers of the federal government, allowing the NSA and FBI to surveil U.S. citizens without a warrant. Hey, is this thing recording me? So, although you can argue this was necessary at the time, many of these powers still exist today. I don't think these guys would be.
When a president or Senate or House, Supreme Court, whenever one gets an increase in power, they never give it back. It's just applied, or it's just implied that they're going to use it properly. They never give back power. It's always more power to grab.
Be too happy about a surveillance state. Then came Hurricane Katrina, where the levees broke, New Orleans flooded, and the federal government's response was, "We're working on it." 'Cause as people were left stranded on rooftops, the government set up the Louisiana Superdome as the shelter of last resort. But when 30,000 people showed up, it turned out to be a nightmare. The roof was damaged, the power failed, and toilets overflowed.
I'm not going to blame him for damaging the roof, toilet overflowing, and all this other stuff. That's not Bush's responsibility. He's not sitting at the White House going, "How are them toilets? Are they flowing good?" There's a lot of other people in a chain of command that need to be taking care of this. I'm not just pointing the finger at the top instantly.
Which just stinks. The whole fiasco reeked of government inefficiency, and Bush was the poster child. So not only was Bush messing things up back then, but Americans are still living with the consequences today. But speaking of messing stuff up, after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, America needed a steady hand to unite the country. Instead, it got Andrew Johnson, a former slaveholder from Tennessee who, believe it or not, didn't exactly believe in racial equality. He vetoed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which would grant citizenship and basic rights to formerly enslaved people. Things like the right to make contracts, own property, and be treated equally under the law. What the heck, man? But Congress wasn't having it. They overrode his veto and pushed through the 14th Amendment, locking those rights into the Constitution. But Johnson didn't back down. He found other ways to prop up the South, like issuing mass pardons to tens of thousands of Confederates. Because it's kind of a big deal when you take up arms against the United States. Most governments would throw you in jail or hang you for treason.
I think that's kind of what Lincoln wanted too. He just wanted to be done with it. Once the war was over, let's just be done with it. We got the concessions we wanted by winning the war. Now, let's just return to the status quo in terms of us being a country again. I think Lincoln would have done that anyways. So Johnson being tagged with it being some negative thing, maybe Lincoln changes his mind. Maybe a couple of people are hanged. I don't know. We'll never know. But I think that Johnson, in a way, was doing what Lincoln would have wanted. That's why Grant was able to give Lee such lenient terms. Lincoln was fine with that. So, I don't think this is a Andrew Johnson thing.
But Johnson restored their rights and let them retake power in the South.
That I don't know if Lincoln would have been 100% on board with. But again, unfortunately, Lincoln's gone. Johnson's the president. Johnson can make decisions on his own. He doesn't have to follow what Lincoln would have done.
His logic? We shouldn't kick the losers while they're down. But as you might have guessed, his plan backfired. Because this started the Jim Crow era, created fertile ground for the Ku Klux Klan, and stoked racial tensions nationwide. In Congress's eyes, Johnson had basically undone the point of winning the whole Civil War. So they impeached him, the first presidential impeachment in U.S. history, where Johnson faced trial in the Senate and survived conviction by just one vote. Phew, that was close. As you can tell, post-Civil War America was crazy. We needed a leader to rise above the hate and pull the country forward. Instead, Johnson doubled down on division. But if you thought that was bad, get ready for Herbert Hoover, who promised Americans a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. And honestly, people believed him. Because on paper, Hoover had a glittering resume. Self-made millionaire, humanitarian, and a respected public servant. This guy was going to usher America into a new golden age. Until the Great Depression hit.
So he saw it coming when he was working with Calvin Coolidge. His mistake was when he got into office. I think he was a little apprehensive to make changes because he saw it, but there's always that thought of maybe it'll self-correct with a new president, new terms, a change. It didn't. Calvin Coolidge had been making budget cuts to pay down the debt, and he got a little too happy with the scissors, you could say.
Just months into his term, the stock market crashed and Hoover froze.
And again, with any president stepping in, when something like this happens, it happens on their watch, but it's not their fault. Earlier, something happens, if Trump does something today, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to affect tomorrow. That could affect 3 years from now. Everything takes time to kind of settle in and changes to be made before you can really see the direction.
As a staunch capitalist, he believed the government intervention would only make things worse. So he sat back and let private charities and local governments handle the crisis. The results? Banks collapsed, businesses shuttered, and unemployment soared to 25%. I'm going broke out here, man! But the final blow came in 1932 with the Bonus Army protest, where 15,000 World War I veterans marched peacefully on Washington, D.C., demanding early payment of bonuses they were promised, money they desperately needed to survive. And Hoover's response?
I think he sent MacArthur.
He sent in the U.S. Army. Led by General Douglas MacArthur.
Side note, Douglas MacArthur has a father named Arthur MacArthur who fought at the Battle of Chickamauga during the Civil War under... the second Battle of Chickamauga was under Grant. But Arthur MacArthur was also... Did he have a position in... Was it McKinley's cabinet? Because Hoover was 31. But he was... let me check. It has nothing to do with this. But I'm going to check anyways. I've already brought it up. Okay. Arthur MacArthur was a lieutenant general of the United States Army when he died in 1912. He became military governor general of the American-occupied Philippines in 1900. I just spit on my phone. His term ended a year later due to clashes with the civilian governor, future U.S. President William Howard Taft. Taft was 27, number 27. He was put in office by President William McKinley. Preceded by Elwell Stephen Otis. He's buried in Um, Arlington Cemetery. Huh. Let's see something. Okay. All right. Sorry. Back to the video.
Federal troops used tear gas, tanks, and bayonets to violently clear the encampment. And when photographs of assaulted veterans hit the front page of newspapers across America, it was game over. Hoover's legacy was sealed, not as a helper, but as a cold, clueless man who fumbled the Great Depression and turned tanks against our own veterans. No list of terrible presidents would be complete without the guy who watched the Civil War unfold from the front row and did nothing. An event so devastating, it almost killed the country forever. When James Buchanan took office in 1857, the nation was already tearing at the seams over slavery. He had a choice: take action and lead, or do nothing. Instead, he chose door number 3 and let the Supreme Court handle it, which led to the...
Buchanan was very much a lawyer and didn't feel like he could overstep certain things, which other presidents do. But I think he wanted every decision to be made by the courts, and then he would enforce it. That was kind of what he believed maybe the presidency was.
infamous Dred Scott decision that said Black Americans could never be citizens. And Buchanan celebrated. The debate was over in his mind. He even pressured justices behind the scenes to make a sweeping pro-slavery ruling, thinking this would settle the issue once and for all. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Instead, it lit a fire under the North. And 3 years later, Abraham Lincoln, who opposed the expansion of slavery, won the presidency without a single Southern electoral vote.
I never heard of Lincoln. Let me know, was he any good? I don't know anything about him.
Nice work, Top Hat. The South panicked. With no more national power, Southern states began seceding from the Union before Lincoln took office. And Buchanan, who was still president, insisted that secession was illegal, but also claimed the federal government had no authority to stop it. Thanks for nothing, dude. By the time Buchanan left office, 7 states were gone. Federal forts had been seized, and America was free-falling into civil war. Buchanan's legacy isn't defined by scandal or one bad law. It's defined by his failure to act when the nation's very survival was at stake.
Okay, so who's he going to have at number 1? Who's he going to have at number 1? Who's he going to have at number 1? Man, this is a tough one. Buchanan, Pierce, Millard Fillmore. Is he going to say Nixon because he resigned? Washington safe, Lincoln safe, potentially Jackson, Andrew Jackson, potentially because of the banking crisis. Oh boy. So I'm looking at my bookshelf. I'm looking at all the presidential books that I have, and I'm trying to find one. Yeah, I'm going to say it's Nixon or Jackson. I'm going to say it's his opinion. Jackson, Indian Removal Act. Nixon resigned. Ooh. I'm going to say he's going to say Jackson, Andrew Jackson. Honorable mentions Nixon because of the resignation. I'm going with it.
Sheesh. I mean, it couldn't possibly get any worse than that, right? Well, believe it or not, it does. Because this is the worst president in U.S. history.
This is going to be not Jackson, not Nixon. Oh, I have a book of you. Where is it? Is this Warren G. Harding?
His name is Warren G. Harding.
Oh,
A man so unqualified for the job, he even admits it. Harding once privately said,
I don't think any person enters into the presidency and says, yeah, this job, I'm really way better. This is like McDonald's to me. Like, I am way overqualified. No one enters it. Everyone realizes from day one, this is very overwhelming. What's he say?
I am not fit for this office and should never have been here.
George Washington felt like he didn't deserve it either, so I'm not going to hold that against him.
And he wasn't wrong, because Harding ran on returning America to normalcy. Instead, he delivered the most corrupt administration of all time,
Teapot
stacking
Dome.
his cabinet with the Ohio Gang, a crew of poker buddies, party friends, and political cronies who looted the government like a bank robbery. Take the Teapot Dome scandal, where a Secretary of the Interior secretly leased federal oil reserves to private companies in exchange for bribes. Bad? Oh, you bet. But not as bad as the head of the Veterans Bureau, who embezzled millions meant for wounded soldiers. Or his Attorney General, who allegedly took kickbacks to look the other way while criminals ran wild during Prohibition. And while all of this was happening, Harding spent his days golfing, gambling, and drinking, which was illegal during the Prohibition, by the way.
He was also, scientifically speaking, banging broads that weren't his wife.
He even had multiple affairs while in office. This dude's the worst. Harding even admitted, I have no trouble with my enemies. I can take care of my enemies in a fight. But my damn friends, they're the ones that keep me walking the floor at nights. And maybe the guilt started eating away at him, because Warren G. Harding died of a heart attack in 1923, mid-scandal, leaving the country shocked at the rot inside his administration. Harding's presidency didn't just damage trust in government, it shattered it. But hey, maybe that was a good thing, because today we're still skeptical of political corruption, even with it happening in front of our faces. How's that stock portfolio going up? But there you have it, the worst presidents in American history. Not only did they stink at their jobs, they nearly broke the country. But if you thought their legacies were dark, wait until you hear how they died. One choked on cherries. Another dropped dead from a stroke. And yeah, one got assassinated in broad daylight. This is how every president died in their last words.
Yeah, William Henry Harrison should not be on this list. Just to be fair. If you're going to put Harrison on there because of that, then you got to put Grover Cleveland because he had 6 months. But people look at Grover Cleveland as the what-if president because that's what he was. Potentially very good. We don't know what William Henry Harrison was. Yeah, he shouldn't be on this list. Warren G. Harding didn't throw me. Some people will say Woodrow Wilson should be one. I've never really looked at the worst presidents in terms of ranking them as this person is the absolute worst. Warren G. Harding, yeah, not shocking. James Buchanan, yes. I'm more upset with Franklin Pierce just because Franklin Pierce, I'm not trying to make excuses for the guy. Anyways, this has been a long video, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Hope you enjoyed. Who was your top 10 terrible presidents? Give me your 3 mediocre presidents. How about that one? All right, until next time, have a good day, have a good night.